Welcome to this series of readings of the Mechanization concept, a manifesto by the Great Divine Director. There are 22 parts to these releases by the Great Divine Director. He has asked that they be read in the order of their release. I'm Caroline Hansky, the reader. The teachings were given by the Great Divine Director through the messenger Mark L. Prophet in 1965. Permission was granted for reading them and making them available to the general public in audio form. These readings are from Mark and Elizabeth Prophet, The Mechanization Concept, The Mysteries of God on the Creation of Mechanized Man, Pearls of Wisdom, Volume 8, Teachings of the Ascended Masters, Summit University Press, copyright Church Universal and Triumphant, 1965. They are also published as Mark L. Prophet, the Soulless One, Cloning a Counterfeit Creation. Copyright 1965, 1980, 1981, Summit University Press. Why would you want to listen to and or read these releases? Because the message in them is as important now, or even more so, as when it was originally delivered. The message is serious and ought to be taken seriously. The mechanical, non-human creation, not created by God ones, are among us and have been for thousands of years. We have taken on their consciousness to some degree and must free ourselves from it. Prayer and working on our psychology are two ways of doing this. But first, we must be aware of what the mechanical consciousness is. These releases by the Great Divine Director are for this purpose. What makes this so relevant at this time? If you are following the news of the development of robots for every conceivable purpose, then is it not curious that this is made to seem a new development? As these current robots are portrayed, they are obviously mechanical. Yet, just as obvious from the Great Divine Director teachings is the fact that the robots that have been on the earth for thousands of years appear like humans. We don't know the difference. Then why is it important to make us think this is a new advanced development? Something to ponder. The Great Divine Director is a cosmic being with many offices in the spiritual hierarchy. For example, he is a member of the Karmic Board in which he represents the first ray of God power. He is known as the Great Divine Director because he has merged his consciousness with the cosmic cycles of God's divine plan for untold universes of light. Great Divine Director is the title of an office in the cosmic hierarchy, given to the one who, by virtue of diligent application over the eons, focuses within his causal body the formula of the ascension for the children of God and the sons and daughters of the Most High evolving in this cosmos. The causal body is the spiritual part of us in which is stored our attainment, all merit we have ever accrued, our treasures stored in heaven. The Great Divine Director's causal body is a giant blue sphere that surrounds the entire planet. Thus his attainment of cosmic consciousness qualifies him to ensoul the flame of divine direction on behalf of Earth's evolutions and untold lifeways beyond. The Great Divine Director long ago passed those initiations that placed him at cosmic levels of service and qualified him to become the Manu of the seventh root race. A Manu embodies the archetype for an entire life wave of souls who will incarnate on Earth at a certain period, including the divine image and likeness out of which they are made and the pattern of their destiny. The seventh root race is destined to embody first in South America under the Great Divine Director, and so he presides spiritually over the continent of South America. He is then the lawgiver and sponsor of the seventh root race, the one who holds the blueprint for the entire race of the souls who begin their embodiment in the age of Aquarius that is now dawning. Godfrey Ray King, author of the book, The Magic Presence, describes the Great Divine Director in it. This majestic being stood fully 6 feet 4 inches in height, with wavy hair that fell to his shoulders and looked like sunshine on gold. His robes glittered with points of light like jewels that flashed continually with the tremendous radiance of the power held under his control and obedient to his conscious direction. The girdle encircling his waist was a mass of sapphires and diamonds. From it hung a panel to a few inches below the knees. This also was a mass of jewels. End of quote. The great divine director has said, I pray that you will call to me, for I have within my consciousness the scroll of the divine plan for every living soul on Terra and in the vast beyond. The Mechanization Concept, a Manifesto by the Great Divine Director, Part G, Grids. To you who fear no evil, because the Lord is with you, I expose the insidious mechanical grids and floating force fields of mankind's misqualified thoughts and feelings, and the soul's defenses against them. Beloved ones, mindful now of the cherished words of the psalmist of old, Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. I would speak of the insidious mechanical grids and force fields which exist invisibly but subtly in the planetary atmosphere. Precious ones, the lovely sweet earth upon which God has bestowed so much abundance has become a treacherous abode in many unexpected places, for the very atmosphere itself has been charged with large floating grids or force fields, embodying cross-currents of human thought and feeling. And the conflicting harmonic rate of vibration of these fields is such as to bring about great discomfort to elemental life as well as to mankind. Now it is true that ignorance may be bliss to some among mankind, who perhaps desire to maintain an attitude of what they do not know need not harm them. But I think we are better judges of this from the ascended octave than are mankind here below, and therefore I lovingly bestow this knowledge upon all who are able to receive it, so that they may be fortified against the insipid outpourings of human mass thought and feeling. As you know, precious ones, whenever an individual uses energy, and this always occurs whenever thought or feeling is exercised, the energy itself is not destroyed, even after passing through the nexus of consciousness, where qualification with bane or blessing occurs. Hence, energy is continually being released by all of mankind into the atmosphere. Now, because of the law of harmonics dealing with affinities, like seeks out like, and therefore a strengthening occurs in the strata of misqualified energy as well as in that of properly qualified energy, as line upon line of similarly qualified vibrations are added thereto. Many have noted that in spiritual places, temples and churches, they can receive a greater inrush of peace than in the busy streets and businesses of the outer world. Contrariwise, when entering into places qualified with feuds or destructive and trivial passions, mankind are often ensnared in feelings which do not sustain the vibratory action of God happiness and peace. Let all take into account, then, how very important is the law governing affinitized vibration. Likewise, let all examine the fact that the solar plexus as a center, unless guarded, may become a doorway through which negative vibrations enter, to bring about a descent of the levels of normally happy consciousness, clouding the sun of man's being with thoughts of fear or threat, foreboding or danger. As discord is never a part of the divine plan, but is solely an action of universal law in its application with respect to karma, I think it wise that the mechanical nature of this law be understood, so that our chelas can become reasonably freer from unwanted conditions. Your precious tube of light is, of course, an invincible protection against the intake of such volatile or desultory vibratory actions, as well as of downward spirals of despair. Yet it is very true that many of the students at one time or another, often unwittingly, do fail in their application to maintain the required spiritual contact. And thus in an unguarded moment, an inrush of misqualified energy does occur, whereby vibrations of unhappiness do enter the feeling world. Even attitudes of faithlessness are sometimes taken in, and amplified as feelings of doubt and uncertainty. The proximity of beloved Simon Peter to Jesus and his Galilean embodiment was no proof against the inrush of this negation. For when Jesus bid him to walk upon the waves, as the chronicles record, he lost faith momentarily, even in full view of the Master himself. The present release of greater understanding is vouchsafed to mankind today because of the mission of the Christ and every avatar whom God has so lovingly sent to the earth. The service of every angel and tiny deva or builder of form is important in the universal scheme, and no one is even relatively unimportant. After all, precious ones, if you were receiving your supply through a lowly beggar, it would not matter if the gift came from the greatest king, for unless the beggar existed to pass it on to you, you could well go hungry. Hence, all are important in the divine grace of bestowing life to all. There do exist, then, in the atmosphere throughout the entire planet, floating force fields or grids, containing the scapegoat energies of mankind's wrong thought and feeling. These abide in larger quantities in the so-called ghettos of large cities, and such places are rampant with the ravages of crime and poverty. Yet I can recall but few spaces upon the landed area of the earth where these large force fields do not occasionally drift to bring about potential destruction where taken in. They are like floating minefields in the sea, insidiously existing beneath the level of visibility. They drift to affect the unwary of mankind and to bring about results little dreamed of by most contemporary men. Bear in mind that each shade of human opinion carries a specifically different rate of vibration, and that thousands of force fields are anti-this and anti-that, making for innumerable clashes referred to by beloved Moria as human dissonance, which are actually impediments to the full harmonic orchestration of the brotherhood of man. The subtle nature of man's free will and his insistence upon having his own way have led many well-meaning people into pitfalls of discord so trivial as to cause even the simple to smile. Yet the stiff-necked move without motion into the realm of mental and spiritual stagnation. The sad part is their lack of awareness of the pitiful plight of their being. May I say of these, for their freedom's sake, deliver them from evil. The power of prayer and spiritual attunement, of closely living to the divine presence of God, the maintaining of attitudes of happiness and awareness of life's purposes, the sustainment of service and goodwill for others, and the amplification of every divine attitude is, of course, one's own best protection against the intake of these forces. I cannot deny some of them, by reason of size and density patterns, are particularly lethal, and hence deadly to those who are unsuspecting and therefore unprotected against them. Just as a cloud will cover the face of the sun preceding a storm, so in many cases a sudden feeling or drop in the normal level of happiness or well-being will indicate the presence of such an invisible force field. There are two simple defenses available to mankind against these unseen pitfalls. One is to recognize that mobility can soon bring an individual into an area out of the center of the thrust. Hence, many times a distance of 1 or 2 miles will give absolute safety. At other times, for various reasons, when individuals cannot conveniently flee the invaded area, they can make mighty applications to the Godhead, to the cosmic beings and the ascended masters, including beloved Jesus and Archangel Michael, for spiritual assistance in moving these force fields away or transmuting them into light. Now, I do not for one moment wish any to accept that no matter how deadly these force fields may be, they cannot be made to yield to the invincible power of God. Yet, just as Don Quixote was unable to defeat the windmills with the point of his lance, so it is senseless to, in the words of St. Paul, fight as one who beateth the air. You see, there are few in physical embodiment today who are able on the instant to cope with the more malevolent of these conditions from the level of mankind's externalized personal grace. But I am certain no call goes unheeded by heaven, and therefore mighty inroads can be made into these force fields. Sometimes they can be reduced or cut in half by a thrust of the sword of blue flame invoked by Chila. It is not my wish to have the student body overly conscious of these conditions. Yet, precious ones, it is not wise to be wholly unconsciously subject to them either. Therefore, in a state of perfect mental and spiritual balance, mankind ought to understand that these conditions do exist and that they function almost mechanically, not always as fixed monsters either, but frequently as predatory, roaming beasts of the air, subject to unconscious driftings and magnetization by minutely affinitized centers in individuals or in groups. This means then, precious ones, that those who permit themselves to be subject to vibratory actions of fear, anger, human viciousness, or hatred, or even a sense of wrong or injustice, may draw to themselves from various parts of the planet either small or large focuses of the exact type of the quality of negation they permit to play through their mind and feeling consciousness. Is this not a sound argument, then, for the constant maintenance of thoughts of beauty, holiness, protection, and grace? You see, precious ones, these conditions which function upon the planet so automatically as the result of man's defection from the laws of God have become in this age of Armageddon an ever-present threat which the powers of light are most anxious to dissipate in the freeing of the planet from every unwanted force and condition. There is no need for me to diagram these force fields for the sake of the more scientific of my readers, for they exist in various sizes and shapes, some of which resemble the popular nebbish figures depicted by modern cartoonists in your papers. The sizes vary from those no bigger than a man's hand to some which are huge clouds covering many miles of the earth's surface. It may not be interesting to some of you, nor fully understood by all, but I mention in passing that there is a special branch of Archangel Michael's legions that devotes a great deal of time to what you might call dive-bombing these formations and breaking them up into smaller sections so that they pose less of a threat to the mankind of Earth. Naturally, the more calls that are made by the larger numbers of mankind to Archangel Michael and the beloved ascended host, the greater the quantity of spiritual energy that can be released for the dissipation of these unwanted human creations. After all, blessed ones, these are the mechanical creations of unthinking man. I smile as I say this, for they are the result of man's thoughts and feelings, but not thoughts and feelings qualified with godliness, or the right thought of the Godhead, which is the true power of thought. Now it goes almost without saying, precious ones, that few among mankind, if they were able at all to fully control themselves, would knowingly create such vibrations of human viciousness and centers of darkness. Yet many of these are not created by any one individual at all, but by the many who think subtle and supposedly harmless thoughts against another individual. Because energy is most impersonal, like seeks like, and it is the union of shadowed substance with shadowed substance that causes the densification and strengthening of these nefarious forces. I must admit that there are certain activities of the black magicians and insidious actions which we may well term vicious witchcraft, which deliberately foster and encourage the building up of such reservoirs of negated energy. Precious ones, by way of illustration may I say that money too is a form of economic energy, and certainly because mankind desire to accumulate it for their future needs, many organizations desire to have a reservoir of funds available to them for a specific purpose. The war engines of the world require the appropriation of military funds. In order to relieve the poor of the world, appropriations are usually made by constructed nations for the education and improvement of the poor, as well as to provide their daily necessities, and those opportunities which should enable them to rise out of their unwanted conditions. Do you see, then, that reservoirs of negative force can also be accumulated in these drifting banks of negation, to be used by the brothers of the shadow to draw upon when needed to fight against good? Well, precious ones, this misqualified energy becomes available to the powers of darkness, then, to use in confusing the mind of man and in upsetting his world whenever possible, so as to create more and more mass confusion. This is why undesirable television programs, vile movies, and destructive books are so effective in disturbing the very young, as well as people of all ages. These tie emotionally into these clouds of negated energy and feed, through the consciousness, holding an absorbing fascination for mankind, once they become emotionally involved in the drama. The plot sequences of most of these unwholesome stories are often mere duplications of themselves in a new format. We do not deny that many of the authors thereof enjoy great popularity with mankind, but they must bear well in mind that they will one day give account of their stewardship of life. Alfred Hitchcock is one who is responsible for the release of a very vicious and horrific fountainhead of negative scenarios which drag the consciousness of mankind down into the mire of the lower astral regions. This individual will find, when he comes face to face with the realities of life, that it is not the will of God that he devote his energy to such activities as he has currently done. This I may well term a disservice to mankind. Yet I call to your attention that such diversions are supported by many of mankind who see no particular harm in them. You see, precious ones, it does not matter through whom the misqualification occurs upon earth. The fact that it does occur at all is a threat to all mankind embodied here. Let it be made clear that we do not frown upon drama, for your own Lord Mahachohan, in his epic releases, while embodied as Homer, did bring about cultural understanding which flows forth to the present age. Your beloved Saint Germain, in his magnificent Shakespearean releases, and his many other writings, did bring about the renaissance of virtue and culture to the world. There are so many facets and so many angles to the great manifestation of opportunity called life, that I hope no one will be so blind as to say the great divine director has taken us far afield. My intent is to give you a palatable release which will be practical in effectively releasing you from some unwanted conditions which are so subtle that they often snare the most devoted souls. The heavenly hierarchy, recognizing the truth of beloved Jesus' statement that the children of this world are in their generation wiser than the children of light, as I have said before, are interested in this series which I am releasing, in bringing dynamically to mankind's attention the subtle little traps which are so overlooked by the unsuspecting and the innocent. It is absolutely true that there is no power but God. It is also true that good will ultimately triumph, but in effectively seeing to it that good does triumph over the veil of disqualified energy called evil, we must now invoke the forces of mercy that shall swiftly respond to the imploration of the saints. How long, O Lord? While it is true that one day with God may be 1,000 years, or 1,000 years be as one day, to the embodied soul suffering the thraldom of sense consciousness and the misqualification of energy that results in human viciousness and destruction, these trials have basic reality during the time individuals must pass through them. We do not hold with the concept of doing evil that good may come, but hold only with the concept of doing good that good may expand. Let all then see in these current releases of the Great White Brotherhood, and all that manifests in the Summit Lighthouse activity, the great giant sweep of a beam of intense light energy, calculated not to snare the consciousness of mankind with mere pretty dramas or sequences which may tickle the ear or provide passing entertainment, but rather to release the mighty soul-searching beam of cosmic Christ discrimination into the affairs of men, that total freedom may manifest and great divine friendships be formed based on the solid bedrock of divinity. Only then can we weld together the spiritual body upon the planet. So long as minute dissensions and divisions occur, so long as individuals set up themselves and their human standards as criteria to judge the children of God upon earth, so long as men fall directly into the traps that are set for them, seeking to bring about malicious gossip against our greatest outposts, the world will still be in some peril. Yet the wise and perceptive at all times recognize and know that the greater the concentrated power of truth used to examine the fabric of thought, and the power of truth released as God directs into man, the greater the opposition thereto. The words of Jesus, "Woe unto you when all men shall speak well of you," echo down the halls of the centuries to the present hour. And thus we do not anticipate that all men will give their approval to divine truth, or will even recognize its source. But as the Christ long ago said, "My sheep will hear my voice," and thus we are content to release upon the altar of Almighty God the great soul-liberating truths of being from men of this century. I shall continue to be the great divine director. How we cherish the divine director's penchant for truth! With what measure shall our gratitude flow forth? The karmic board stands majestically enthralled by the scope of his release. Let men, angels, and masters honor God for the precious conferments of straight knowledge he has already given. Thus shall perceptive men halt the release of destructive energy to the world. Thus shall new bolts of the blue lightning of divine love strike the earth with liberating fervor. El Moria.
Is amazing every time, isn't it?
It is.
We're going to be giving the decree Great Divine Director 10.08, and then after the preamble, we're going to be giving the Blue Angels dive bomb call, and then we're going to follow that with I Am God's Will, El Moria, and